thank you for joining us here on the Spooky October podcast. The podcast that's going to make your knees shiver and your stomach queasy. I'm your host, the pumpkin that's full of self-doubt, and I'm here with a very special guest.
I am your co-host for today, Deven Kay.
Oh, dude, this guy comes up like you'd think that I tell him this stuff in advance. I'm sorry that I broke the illusion of the thing. I mean, you'd think that I told him.
Not just historian, but comedian.
Sure. Yeah, I'd give you that one. Have you ever done an open mic before?
No, I've wanted to for a while. It's honestly just that the pandemic happened was by the time I had kind of thought of it. And then I just kind of needed to come up with some stuff to say. But honestly, I'm probably the kind of person who could probably just maybe drop something good and then just walk in there with no lines.
Yeah, you have your staples. We should be talking about something spooky though. What's your favorite monster? What if you could be any monster? What would you want to be? That's a better question.
Oh, I'd want to be a dragon, man.
Be a dragon? Okay.
You can fly. You can shoot fire. Plus, you sit around hoarding gold and shit, living in mountains. I can't imagine what's better.
See, I always figured the fire breathing thing was kind of like a misinterpretation of what was actually happening, because if you just have a small fire and just a big creature was breathing on it, it would make it a big fire. That's what I always kind of thought with that, right? That it wasn't actually that they were breathing fire. But
there's a lot of reference in lore to magic being tied to music or to singing.
Okay.
So I often wonder if maybe dragons just didn't spit mad fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They didn't actually spit fire. They were just the original rap battling, but with magic.
They were just really skilled on the mic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, speaking of being skilled on the mic, this is not the
Spooky October
podcast. And hopefully I'm not a pumpkin filled with self-doubt, because we got to do a good podcast today. And, those types of mindsets are not going to be helpful for this episode of the Photography Friends podcast, which is about Kennedy again, everybody. I'm your photographer, Jared Poirier, and I'm here with our resident handsome man, Deven Kay. How you doing, man? How's your week been? 2 weeks, because how's your 2 weeks? We took a week off for Canadian Thanksgiving.
We did, yeah. It's been a pretty decent 2 weeks. I lost my phone the weekend of Thanksgiving, which was frustrating, and definitely there was probably a whole lot of important stuff that I needed to remember on there. But I don't know. I'm sure it'll figure itself out.
Yeah, it's probably in your brain. I mean, I was gonna try to give you the pass on that one and just use the excuse of we took the week off for Thanksgiving. Much like the CIA, I wanted to have the official story, but you've gone with the truth, and I appreciate that, Dev. So
there's really nothing shameful about the truth here. You know what? Accidents happen sometimes.
It's true, man. Sometimes they do happen. And hopefully this podcast wasn't an accident. I've been having a good time. I'm definitely not obsessed with this topic.
I wouldn't say you're obsessed with this topic, but I would say that even though I've known you for a long time, I wouldn't have guessed the amount of passion that you would have for the topic. I didn't anticipate that.
Well, I'm passionate about politics, man. I'm passionate about that, and I'm passionate about democracy, I guess. That sounds cheesy. But anyways.
It's super rare these days, honestly.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. Anyways, but our sponsor is, of course, CloudSpot. Deven, the easiest way for photographers to deliver and sell their photos online. It's weird that I hear the music in my head now when I'm saying it. Anyways, you can experience beautiful galleries, grandma-proof image downloads, and custom storefronts for sales. You guys know the drill. If you want 50% off for the first 12 months, you're going to go down the description. You're going to click that link. And let's talk about some sources for today's episode. What do you have? What's your big main source for today, man?
So, couple things for today. Today I have the autopsy report from the hospital in Dallas, as well as the autopsy report from the Naval Hospital. I was on archives.gov, which is basically the U.S. government's website for sharing and disseminating any documents that are available for the
So
public
much
to
stuff
see.
on there, man. Really cool.
Yeah.
So many primary sources on there. It's nuts.
Yeah, a lot. So I kind of like picked apart the Warren Commission report
Cool.
this morning.
Wow. Yeah.
And a bit last night, but in a big way this morning. The autopsy reports are the sort of thing that, like, there's a lot of medical details in there that wouldn't necessarily stick with me the way history would. So it's better for me to have read an autopsy report, well, at about 6 this morning rather than like over the course of the last few weeks, because it's like there's a bunch of words in there,
There's a bunch of words in there.
Medical words. They're words, just big words.
So many words. That is a problem with this topic. There are a lot of words involved.
There's a lot of documents on the topic, to be honest,
for sure.
because like I didn't realize until just the other day there have still been like movements put forward in the U.S. House about the Kennedy assassination in perpetuity since it happened. Like, this isn't just a thing that the public are interested in, or that there's interested about on the internet.
Yeah.
Congressmen and senators, they still want to know about this. The government is still trying to find out what the government knows about this.
Yeah, crazy. And still new things being released, like, that are just coming out. Even there was a big release of CIA documents, right, in last year, December last year.
Yeah. I heard a lot of people say that the release of those documents wasn't a huge change from what you had before, because a lot of those documents had been released with redactions, which I guess is when they like take the black marker and put it over it.
Yeah.
And I'm given to understand that when redacted things are released, political think tanks and like poli-sci experts and stuff will pick through them and try to get the details out of them.
Yeah.
But that being said, I think that probably no matter what it is, there's so much volume of information to be gone through that it would really be hard to say what's really relevant and what's not.
Yeah. Well, you just kind of have to read through a lot of it and, decide for yourself, like, if you can back it up with more sources and, find out what's actually legit, which is, kind of fun and maybe a little bit frustrating to do. But we're hopefully going to save our listeners a lot of the trouble of, like, digging into this stuff and keep it photo related as well. We do have an excellent photo of the episode for this one. And I should also note that we're going to be focusing this whole episode, hopefully, around the day that Kennedy actually died. Friday, November 22nd.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lots of things happened on that day. So one of my main sources, I was telling you earlier, I've been reading this book by Clint Hill with help by Lisa McCubbin. I guess that she's like fact checking and kind of, organizing his thoughts into a book, because this is, not really a writer. This guy was in the Secret Service. He's actually the Secret Service agent who you can see in the Zap Rooter film, and I think some other photos of the event of the shooting of Kennedy. He's the guy who actually jumps on the car to protect Jackie. Some other sources on my side here. Archive.gov. Deven may have mentioned there's like the Warren Report and the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That one was in 1979.
Oh, I did see that one too, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really important one. I think it's obviously less rushed than the one that was in 1964. So, they look into some other possibilities, some things that were arguably overlooked in the Warren Report. And the summaries of these are like really nice to read, You can dig right in and find, all of the like primary sources and stuff that they're dealing with in those. But just to read the summaries is also like very helpful in terms of like their conclusions and whatnot, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then Jfklibrary.org. That's one that I turned you on to, I think, Deven.
That one was pretty cool.
Tons of good resources on there. Just like really fascinating stuff. And once you've actually researched this topic quite a bit, it's interesting like how many of the same things kind of come up and reoccur, and you can see like different people's opinions of a situation, different people's recollection of it, and I think somewhere in the middle is where the truth actually is. So
it's incredible though what an impact this man had on on the nation, but even like we're not even American and we're talking about it,
Yeah,
on the world in less than a full term of presidency. You
Yeah.
know, that we're still talking about it, that everybody still cares this much.
Yeah, and it's what, like 60 years later or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So just before we're going to dive in, we're going to talk about that infamous day, November the 22nd, 1963. We do have to mention here in Correction Corner that I was definitely wrong about the date of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I probably said a bunch of times in the last episode, the date 1963. That doesn't make sense. That's the date that he died. So 62 was the Cuban Missile Crisis, late in 62. That's been Correction Corner. Unless you got more. Do you have any more? Anything else that we fucked up?
I don't think I have anything to add. I mean, like, I didn't particularly notice. I didn't jump in. I get credit here too, but
yeah, or whatever the opposite of credit is, blame.
Yeah. Well,
But,
I don't know.
yeah.
Blame sounds so Catholic. Let's just take credit for it. And move
Yeah.
on.
But in honor of Kennedy, shouldn't we do the Catholic one? Anyways.
That's fair. I mean, I was raised Catholic. I'm ethnically Catholic, so I feel like I'll play along
buddy.
for Kennedy.
Just another way that you're
It's
like
blame
Kennedy.
that we're taking blame.
Yeah, we'll take the blame on that one. You guys do have to know that, like, we're not getting any research help on this. Like, this is really purely just, like, two guys who are passionate about it, who have read, like, I don't know, dude, a lot. Now a lot.
Yeah, and Jared has like 4 full-time jobs. I don't really have an excuse, but Jared's
and this
super
is
busy.
one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just get some basic facts, We're talking Dealey Plaza. We're talking Dallas, Texas. Just to give a little bit of historical perspective before we really dig into the facts of the day. Kennedy was the 4th president assassinated after Lincoln, Garfield, and McKinley. Garfield, very famously, was assassinated on a Monday in a very tragic lasagna accident. No, that's a stupid joke. couldn't resist. He was actually assassinated on a Monday though, which is nuts.
Well, that's just another reason to hate Mondays, I guess.
Yeah, true. For him especially.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the assassination of John F. Kennedy was the first of 4 major assassinations in the 1960s. The other ones being Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and of course Bobby Kennedy also gets assassinated in the 60s. Some stuff about like the arrival in Texas. Let's get started on what happened on the day of Kennedy's death. Kennedy arrives in Texas. As we said before, the biggest reason for doing this is political, I'd say, right?
Yeah, I mean, in America, you start campaigning a year ahead for those presidential elections, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So as I understand it, he was campaigning. He was kind of pre-campaigning. He was in the car with his wife and the governor of Texas, as well as his wife.
Mm-hmm.
And their Secret Service agents, and Johnson and Lady Bird were in the car behind them. And I think they were with either a senator or a congressman from Texas. I can't remember which.
Yeah, I think you're right. Even before that, though, there's, just like one thing that I did want to note when Kennedy arrived, on Air Force One, the mix of like supporters and opposition, right? So, a lot of the time when you'll see footage of the motorcade and stuff from that day, it's very focused around like the positive, right? Like people supporting Kennedy, you'll hear about like him meeting some kids and some supporters and shaking hands and all of that, right? Like, and everyone saying like, man, Kennedy is the best. But there was quite a lot of oppositions. There were people who were even holding up signs that like had Kennedy's face, like a wanted poster, right? Like wanted for, not standing up to the commies or whatever and stuff like that.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't a universally popular president. That doesn't mean that he wasn't popular though.
There's never been not in a country as like different as America, right? In terms of like the two sides of the spectrum, it's like pretty split up. So it's almost impossible, I'd say, for someone to be.
That's fair. Yeah. I heard a statistics teacher say once that the larger the sample size gets for Democratic vote, the closer you'll get most times to parity. Especially if you only have 2 options.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right?
So
That's
the larger your population gets, the tighter your votes will get every time.
I'm sure there's a math person who can explain that and understand it perfectly, but it's not me.
Yeah, that's not us though. Yeah.
I'll also note in the like footage and photos of Kennedy arriving and getting in the motorcade and stuff, a notable amount of Confederate flags. Devin,
that doesn't surprise me, but I think that was a lot more common at the time than it is now, and in a much more in a much less obvious way.
Yeah.
Like I think that back then that wasn't really people putting out Confederate flags to protest Kennedy. It was because honestly that issue never really died in the South.
Yeah, they just love it, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, it's kind of weird, but
it's at this point it's basically less than 100 years from the end of the Civil War.
Yeah.
And it's not that long ago for them.
Yeah, just what it represents and stuff like that to me, like
Absolutely,
I almost can't believe that it's just so accepted there and so normal. But anyways, that's just the South, I guess. That's something to understand one dynamic.
That's
about
a whole other
the
podcast.
South. Yeah. So we can get into the motorcade here. There is like Devin was saying, the lead car, the police chief and sheriff are in that one. Then there's the presidential limo. You talked about that, everyone who was on there. Bill Greer, you didn't mention. He's the Secret Service, the guy who was Secret Service member, whatever you call it. What do you call them? Secret Service agent.
They're agents.
Yeah. He's the driver. The car itself was a customized Lincoln Continental, midnight blue, just in case you want to get one. So you can go and look up a 1960s Lincoln Continental midnight blue. They dubbed it the SS 100X, SS standing for Secret Service, I guess.
Oh, that sounds so cool.
Yeah, and then you also have some notable members of the Secret Service, George Hickey and Clint Hill. We'll talk about both of those guys later. Clint Hill especially, since one of my sources for this is, his personal account of the day. Yeah, and we can get into the shots here if you're ready for that.
Yeah, sounds good. So, I guess the best way to say it is that at some point, as they're kind of approaching an underpass, which leads into another square that they're headed towards, the shots are fired. And I guess the Zap Rooter Film, which we're going to cover later, catches some of that. But Kennedy is hit through the neck and through the head. And one of those bullets passes through him and into the governor in front of them. And both cars immediately proceed straight to the hospital from there. The Secret Surgeons.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to note that this is at 12:30.
Yeah. The Secret Service agents immediately do what they're trained to do, which is to jump on top of the people they're protecting and cover them with their bodies.
Yeah, that's what Hill does. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so then the cars proceed straight to the hospital, and Kennedy is brought into the hospital, and they try to revive him, treat him for his wounds.
And so just from Hill's personal recollection of that day, he hears the shots coming from behind the president. Like, that's one thing that he notes. And he says that, and this is a little bit weird to me.
Is it the flurry of shells?
No, it's this thing. So he says that like the shot like hit the president in the back of the head right behind his right ear. And I find it very strange that he would have that detailed. Like when you
How would he have known that then? Yeah.
So it's weird that it's probably just that he's writing it like that, But anyways, I just thought that was a little bit strange. And then, this is like the very tragic thing of Jackie, and I don't want to like get into it too much. This isn't really the point of this podcast, is to be gruesome about it. But two quotes from her on that day, like in that moment, very like just disturbing and heart wrenching. She said, "I have his brains in my hands," and less talked about, but she whispered to him, "I love you, Jack." That's something that Hill actually noted, and he was right there, so he would have seen that stuff.
Multiple sections of the Warren Commission report, including both autopsy reports, mention, specifically from the first hospital, the doctor mentions that when he walks in to do his own bit that he can see Kennedy's brains out on the stretcher. That's referenced multiple times in this, very graphically.
Yeah, well, especially in autopsies and stuff, it gets graphic. So yeah, at the Parkland Memorial Hospital, Kennedy arrives there. They do some things. There's this, they have to try to treat him, even though, like you said, it's pretty hopeless at that point. Malcolm Perry is the doctor who performs the tracheotomy or whatever, tracheostomy.
Yeah, in the autopsy report, they call it a tracheostomy. Essentially, they intubate him through the neck.
Yeah, through that actual wound that you talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
The first bullet that hit him in the back and went straight through the neck, and then the second one was the kill shot in the head there. So yeah.
They had him on forced breathing for a while, but what essentially it says here is that they were massaging the heart to keep it going, but they were unable to get it to go on its own, and eventually they just stopped.
Yeah, at some point, the Catholic priest arrives, administers last rites. So at that point, Kennedy dies 30 minutes after arriving at the hospital. And then Earl Rose is actually the doctor who is supposed to perform the autopsy. So he's actually denied the chance to perform a full autopsy. And this is what you were saying, right? Like when you were looking at the records, that you're like a little bit like, whoa, well, where is this? Like, why are there kind of two autopsy reports, or why is this one not done? And what the heck is going on? So that's actually the different elements of the government, Secret Service, LBJ himself and stuff like that. We're pushing to get Kennedy out of that place and actually perform the autopsy in like a military hospital.
Yeah, it went even beyond that. The Secret Service took all the negatives of any imaging and scans that they had done, basically removed everything from the hospital and brought it all back to the White House.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty wild stuff. So, when you get into the conspiracy side of things, that can get kind of be fuel for that, obviously. The whole thing about that too is that it was against Texas law for that to happen. Like, according to Texas law, if someone's killed in Texas, the autopsy should be done in Texas. So one of these things where I guess state laws are conflicting with federal laws, and there's like actually a fight over Kennedy's body, like literally like people like grabbing the Gertie or whatever you call it and being like, he's coming with us, and they're like, no, you're and a lot of swearing and stuff like that too. People say like, oh, a lot of swearing was going on. So
I can imagine that so especially at that time in the nation, it was like an unprecedented sort of thing in a way. Like, presidents had been assassinated before, but that was when the government was smaller.
Mm-hmm.
And post World War II, the government was it was a much bigger thing. It was more ever present in people's lives. And so it was like a little bit more impactful for everybody, right? Plus the mass media element.
Yeah, they didn't fully have plans for a lot of this stuff. I mean, there's like the succession plan. If the president dies, then you have the vice president is there to take over. But then a lot of those other details, they don't really get hashed out until they get stress tested, like this, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't want to talk too much about this, but the 3 shots thing is interesting as well. So if you look at the Warren Commission from 1964, happened right after. LBJ puts this thing together to basically explain this. It says Oswald acted alone, and there's 3 shots, right? Mm-hmm. Which the 3 shots thing, that pairs up with a lot of people who are there, like the testimony of people who are there, but not everybody, I guess. And not everybody agrees that the shots came from the book depository either, but we can talk about that later. The House Select Committee in 1979, interestingly, they're literally investigating the same thing, trying to look at the same documents, but also, other documents that weren't available at the time. It's interesting that the House Select Committee says that there's, quote, a high probability of a second shooter. And this is based on radio evidence, like one of the cops' radios who happened to be open, and you could hear like a 4th shot on that. This has since been like largely discredited, that basically it was just like a misinterpretation. Maybe it's like a radio picking up a radio. Can't really rely on that too much. So people have definitely, cast shade on that idea. But just this interesting thing that the House Select Committee came to a different conclusion here. And a quote, maybe we'll get into the photo of the episode right after this, but maybe this is the quote of the episode. It's something that Governor Connolly said. So he was in the car with Kennedy, as Deven mentioned, something that he said to Kennedy just as they were rolling into Dealey Plaza. Mr. Kennedy, you can't say that they don't love you here in Dallas.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Famous last words, right? Like,
ooh, raises the hair, right? Like, that's nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways. So let's get into the photo of the episode, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sounds good. I had it up a minute ago, and I'm just bringing it back now. So, I'm looking at LBJ, and I never realized before how much he looks like Woody Harrelson. My God. And just kidding. That's a joke about the movie. But no, he's got his hand on what I know to be a Sunday Missal, which I think is like a book of hymns, I think.
Something like that. Some type of Christian thing.
And he's got his right hand in the air. He's obviously doing the thing where he's swearing the oath. He's surrounded by people he's on Air Force One, and this cabin that he's in, whatever part of it, is just packed. Jackie's beside him. She's still wearing the jacket she was wearing in the car. And there's not a smiling face in the entire bunch.
Definitely
and
not.
And that may not be unprecedented for a presidential swearing in, but it's probably rare.
Yeah, there's maybe some people in the picture who are hiding a smile. LBJ might be, I don't know.
Honestly, I wonder.
But it doesn't really seem like it. That's for sure. The photo itself was shot by this guy, Cecil W. Stoughton. He was Kennedy's White House photographer. He actually shot some very famous photos of Kennedy, including the only photo of JFK, RFK, and Marilyn Monroe all together in one photo, which is pretty cool. And he went on to be Johnson's White House photographer after that. For the photo nerds out there, this was shot on his Hasselblad camera. And according to Cecil's account, Hasselblad's back. According to Cecil himself, because I actually read his account of the day, he said that he knew it was tasteless to take that photo, but he needed to capture history. And I honestly think that he's a big part of this is that these events, like the government and that, is supposed to belong to the people, right? Like, this is supposed to be open. America is supposed to be an open society and stuff like that. So we should be able to see what's going on. So I'm really glad that he took this photo. I
agree with his perspective there. It's unfortunate for President Kennedy's wife, but unfortunately, once he became the president, in a way, he sort of became almost public property.
Yeah. In terms of some other people in the photo, he's being sworn in by U.S. District Court Judge Sarah Hughes. Not sure if you mentioned that. Some other people there, press advisor. That's the one guy who's over in the corner on the left, who
with
looks
the wide eyes there.
Yeah, wide eyes, old wide eyes. Yeah. That is Kennedy's press advisor. It's the woman peeking over LBJ's shoulder is his wife, Lady Bird.
His wife, yeah.
Just one detail as well about Jackie, like you mentioned that she kept the pink Chanel suit on, even though it was stained with blood and brains and stuff. So maybe that's her quietly making some type of statement, which you could, I'm sure, read into quite a bit. Hill, who was there, Clint Hill, he mentioned that, just a personal story, that Jackie actually was expressing concern for him, being oh man, this is bad, what's going to happen to you and stuff like that, which I thought was very in that type of situation, I don't think I'd be thinking about anybody else. But
I mean, it almost seems like a sort of dissociation, right? She might have been sort of mentally escaping into that, or not really processing what she was going through.
Perhaps, or also one angle of it that I was kind of considering is that because Kennedy had so many health problems, maybe she had mentally prepared. Obviously not for that, right? but maybe she had mentally prepared herself in some way, like for his death, or like what that would be like for her, right?
I guess so. I mean, is it also like, maybe it's not inconceivable to think that he might have known through what he was doing that he was going to upset people.
Yeah, true. Yeah, like the political situation was really hot. Yeah,
It was really hot to begin with, and his father had leveraged his contacts in organized crime to help his son get elected, and then his son got elected and started going after organized crime like no government had before. Obviously, right-wing Cuban elements were very unhappy about the Bay of Pigs. Like I said earlier, Kennedy was popular, but he was also, very unpopular with certain elements. There were a lot of people who didn't like him.
yeah. So we can move on to the actual autopsy, which takes place at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Now, interesting, this was actually Jackie's decision, and I didn't really believe this at first when I read it. When I read that, like, Jackie was the one who suggested Bethesda, and that's why they did it there. But it seems like that's actually true. Like, she reading it multiple sources. Yeah,
I don't find that unlikely. So it's very, very. So typically, Bethesda Naval Hospital always provides like a specific doctor for the president, right?
Well, also the fact that he was in the Navy, right? He was a Navy man.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And then one of the angles that I find like really mind-opening to me, like as I was reading this, just digging into it more, the degree to which like all of this stuff is unfolding at the exact same time, because on the way to Bethesda, I think by the time the plane actually lands in Washington, Air Force One, the 707, Oswald's already been arrested.
Yeah.
So this stuff is like just to, again, like try to put yourself in the mindset of like Jackie or somebody who was on that plane, or even LBJ, right? Like how these things are unfolding so quickly that it's like, how do you even process any of it, right? When
especially since you don't know what's happening yet, right? Yeah. Like all these, there's all these events happening, and you're getting all this information about it, but you still haven't formed this clear picture of like, okay, A to B, who's done this and where did it come from? And so like,
that's right.
I'm sure that a lot of people's first assumption was that there was some kind of conspiracy. So,
or well, you should consider the amount of heat actually at this moment, because like there are people who are wondering, oh, is America like under a crazy attack right now? Will they be going after LBJ next? Like what happened? Yeah. What does happen if they kill the president and then kill the vice president? And there's even talk of, what if this is like the first event of a larger like nuclear attack? If it's like, we're going to kill your president and then throw the nukes, right? So people are worried about that as well. So, when you look at some of these things that happen and you kind of, it will look sloppy to us, right? You do have to consider that. And I'm not trying to make excuses for anyone. I'm just saying that like to give wider context to all of this, like, yeah, so many things happening at the same time, and just like a very hot situation and very unprecedented as well.
Sometimes a hot mess can make for the perfect crime, right? Like,
yeah,
that's kind of the best time to slip them in.
A lot of distraction for sure. So the Bethesda Naval Hospital, the actual autopsy that goes on there, I have an account from Hill that I can read to you. But do you want to, because you said that you went into the this particular
autopsy report. I have it right in front of me.
Okay, if you want to get into that right now, we can do that.
It's pretty long, but yeah.
No, I mean, if you want to read the entire thing, that would be great. No, just like whatever.
So it does say the prosector, so I guess the person in charge was Commander J.J. Humes, United States Navy, and his assistant was Commander J. Thornton Boswell, United States Navy. And then I think there was also somebody in the room, Lieutenant Colonel Pierre A. Fink. Marine Corps, USA, actually. Says cause of death, gunshot wound, head. It's pretty succinct. I'd say that covers it. There's a couple paragraphs basically explaining what happened according to available information. Deceased President JFK riding an open car motorcade during official visit to Dallas, Texas. goes on to explain the gunfire and stuff like that. And then it goes into the particulars of an autopsy, which don't necessarily always completely focus straight away on what's happened. So they go straight into describing his body. They say, which I find this interesting too, because you can clearly see that he's got gray hair when you look at pictures of him. They say that he has reddish brown hair and abundant amounts and stuff like that. It's the body of a muscular man. It's interesting, like the kinds of things that they go into. But they come to the conclusion that even though you wouldn't expect a bullet of that type to do the kind of damage it did, I guess the way it hit the skull caused it to expand out and blow that side of his head right out, basically, and do more damage than you would have expected. And that was basically what did it.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot to unpack in all of those statements. But just to stick it to the facts. One bullet that went through the back and the neck. Another bullet that went through the head, and the like head flap thing, I think, is important to note, like the way that is, you said his head kind of exploded, and there's like it's gruesome to talk about, but like a head flap thing that you can see going on.
I didn't really want to get into the details of describing that.
Yeah, it's gross. It's gross, but I think that it's, if we're going to talk about what actually happened and kind of dissect the events, like,
so the way that they said it, I guess, is clearly visible in the above described large skull defect, and extruding from it is lacerated brain tissue, which on close inspection proves to represent the major portion of the right cerebral hemisphere. So what they're saying is that most of his right hemisphere of his brain is now protruding from his skull.
Yeah, it's gross, but maybe important in figuring out, like, that's
how lethal the shot was, essentially. That particular shot, anyways.
There's also the stuff about the casket. Did you get into anything on this? Because from Air Force One to Bethesda Naval Hospital, he's in a different casket. He's in a different casket on Air Force One than he arrives in at Bethesda Naval Hospital, and he's in a body bag.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me, but I can't think of why. But no, I did not get into that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. We'll get into it next episode when we talk about conspiracies.
There is one interesting thing here I see in the autopsy report. It says the brain is removed and preserved for further study following formal infixation. Now, here's my question. Is that brain still around somewhere?
It's missing.
Are you serious?
I am serious, and we'll talk about it in the next episode.
God.
Kennedy's funeral. Let's talk about that, because I think anything further on the autopsy is getting into, episode 4 territory, which we'll definitely get to. The funeral.
Since we like to talk pictures, Kennedy's funeral really does have one of those seminal pictures from the whole event, actually.
Okay, awesome. I guess
it's that picture of, oh God.
Yeah, if you want to find that one.
It's that picture of JFK Jr. And there it is. It's actually his whole family. So it's a picture of, you can see Robert Kennedy, and you can see Jackie. She's dressed up in black. She's got the veil on. And you can also see Carolyn and Robert Jr. And Robert Jr. is saluting the casket as it goes by.
What would you search What would you search if you wanted to bring that up? JFK Jr. Kennedy funeral? But I'll probably do that, right?
Go Kennedy's funeral and then just click images.
Yeah, here, if you search that, I just search those words and it brings it up, right? The 2 kids are there and stuff?
Yeah, the 2 kids are there. And yeah, like I said, Jackie's got a veil on, and the kid's wearing a pea coat, and he's got the salute up, the 4 fingers.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Wow. Yeah, that's an impactful image for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if I remember right, it was a popular image. That was one that made the rounds.
There are 250,000 people who attend Kennedy's funeral in Washington. Just a testament to how many people loved and respected Kennedy, and how much of just a disaster this was for the nation, right?
Yeah, so as somebody who's probably been to way too many funerals at my age, I think I would say that even though I agree that the amount of people that went to his funeral really does reflect how important he was to people. Funerals are more about the living than they are about the dead.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means that not everybody at a funeral is there because they love somebody. But they are important. They are part of grieving and part of moving on. And I think probably in this case, like, not just as a family, say for the Kennedys, but probably as a country to try and move on from like how this sort of thing might impact the political mindset of the nation, right?
Yeah.
And the sense of political optimism, because I do really think it did affect that in a huge way.
Yeah, and a chance for Kennedy to rest as well, I guess. Like, he had a very intense life, and he was in a lot of pain all the time, and so not to to maybe try to put like some type of good, just maybe to try to put myself in the mindset of people who are there. Like, that was maybe one thing that would have cheered you up, is that like at least he gets to rest and he gets to chill out now, and it's up to us to figure out all these problems, not him.
I could understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how Kennedy would have seen it.
Well, he wanted to do
Was
this.
he ready to stop?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's buried obviously in Arlington National
Yeah.
Cemetery. Most like important military and political people get buried there. Yeah, I think that we should get into Lee Harvey Oswald and kind of close out that story before we wrap up this episode. There's a few more things that I want to talk about. We can talk about the Zap Rooter Film, I guess, a little bit if you want to do that, and maybe maybe a hint at the Warren Commission. But let's talk about Lee Harvey Oswald and what happened to him. Events right after he shot John F. Kennedy, or didn't, depending on who you believe. I call this section Lee on the Lam.
Okay, why don't you start out the narrative?
Okay.
And I'm going to jump in.
So immediately after the shots are fired at Kennedy, police, hearing gunshots from the Texas Book Depository, the Texas School Book Depository, they run in. It's Deputy Eugene Boone who actually finds the rifle. One thing to note about the rifle is that it's worn and rusty. It's not a new weapon. And then the 3 spent cartridges are found by Deputy Luke Mooney. Great names in this, man. Eugene Boone and Luke Mooney. Like, that's a buddy cop film.
Names
right
in
there.
the South are like pretty fun sounding sometimes.
Yeah. Shortly after, Oswald is arrested in the Texas theater, not before he kills another police officer, Tippit. And then there's the interrogation of Oswald, and we'll get into the records on that, the tapes, or do they exist, or what's going on with the records of the interrogation of Lee Harvey Oswald. We'll talk about that later on. And Jack Ruby kills Lee Harvey Oswald very quickly after those
custody.
events. Yeah, in police custody while he's being
less
transported.
than 48 hours after he's taken into custody, I think.
Right. I believe that happens on November the 24th.
Yeah, so 2 days.
Yeah, so there's also theories around that, like how Jack Ruby was able to get that access, and why Lee wasn't more just like better taken care of in police custody, right? Like, why did they give an opportunity for someone to kill him? That's kind of, I don't know.
I feel like it might have been a preview of coming attractions for police in America,
Yeah. The officer who is, so there's another, we can call this, photo 3 of the episode, I suppose. Deven's really helping us out getting more photos of the episode, which I like. The photo of Lee Harvey Oswald being killed, which he's actually killed on television. I think this is one of the first times that's ever happened, if not the first. And the officer who is handcuffed to him is Jim Lavelle, and another very famous quote from Jim Lavelle. So he's basically handcuffed to Oswald as Oswald's being transported to say, okay, we've got this guy in custody. He's safe. Like, he's handcuffed to this officer, right? Jim has a very famous quote basically saying, like, to Oswald, man, if someone shoots at you, I hope he's as good a shot as you are.
I read that somewhere.
Yeah. Southern
the interesting
humor.
thing about this photo is that you can't see Jack Ruby's face in it.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Okay.
Like, because I'm looking at it right now and Jack Ruby isn't facing the camera. So for me, the photo isn't proof positive that he shot him. Now, of course, there's like 7 people there to corroborate. But, I'm just saying.
Yeah, weird. I don't know if many people even dispute that, but interesting to note. Sure.
The look on Lavelle's face is like...
I find
it doesn't even look like fear.
I find the whole photo is cartoonish. I don't know why.
It really is. Yeah. Well, I mean, the photographer captured it just at the moment where Oswald is making that.
Yeah.
I assume he's just felt the pain of it, right? And now he's reacting. I wonder why there isn't any smoke or anything like that from the gun.
Could just be
the camera.
But the moment that it was shot, or just like the type of gun, right? Just like not one that doesn't have a lot of gunpowder. I'm not sure, but
and this was, you said, taken on a video camera, right?
That one I'm not sure about either. I think it is just a photo. I think this is a photo, but also the event itself was on TV. Yeah. So I think this photo might be by Bob Jackson, if that makes sense. Anyways. Yeah. Well, there was obviously quite a few like press people in that around, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty nuts event, pretty wild. And for Oswald, he is actually, interestingly enough, operated on in the same hospital that Kennedy was operated on.
Oh, really?
Parkland Memorial Hospital. Yeah, this is all happening in like the same, few area, blocks of Dallas, right? So, they're operated on in the same hospital, but not the same room, even though it would have been procedure to, if Theater 1 was open, that Oswald would be brought in there after receiving those gunshot wounds. It's actually room 5 that he's operated on, because Kennedy was operated on in room 1, a day before. Yeah, a couple days before.
Got you. Okay. Interesting.
Kind of all I've got on that stuff. We could talk a little bit about the Zap Rooter film if you want.
Yeah, we can. So the Zap Rooter film was taken by just somebody who was in the square, actually. And he was videotaping right at the moment that pretty much everything happened. I mean, if anybody's ever seen some kind of film of the Kennedy assassination, I think probably they were seeing the Zap Rooter film. I can't imagine any other clip that's as clear to watch.
There isn't one. This is the best. Yeah.
The only one. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, the most it's the most complete. It's there's other photos and videos and stuff. There's actually 32 people who are taking photos and videos of the event. So this is one of the 32, but it is the best one. It's the most complete, the longest, the best angle as well, right? Just the fact it was Abraham and his wife, Lillian Zap Rooter. That's where it gets the name. That's who shot it. They just wanted like a good angle of the president as he was passing by. The camera they used, a Bell and Howell home movie camera.
I just found that. I was about to jump in and be like, "Oh, I'm doing it this time."
Oh, you can do it. Do you have it? Okay, well, tell us about.
Well, it's a Bell and Howell Zoomatic movie camera.
It takes 8mm film. The film itself is 26 seconds, and the average frame rate is 18 frames per second. The other stuff is just like so many things that people can look at on this film and analyze it. If you get into actually reading the documents like Deven and I have, you'll see people refer to like specific frames of this thing. They'll say like, oh, well, frame, 132 shows this and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm looking right now at frame 371, and it's Jackie reaching out to grab Clint Hill's hand.
Yeah, it captures like pretty much everything, at least from that one angle, right? There is some weird stuff. I mean, it's not publicly aired until 1970. So that's, if you're thinking like it was immediately shown to the public, that's not the case. And there is some stuff with like the chain of custody and frames being destroyed. So there, it was kind of passed around to a few different people. Obviously, it was developed. One of the copies went to Zap Rooter, and I think like Time or whatever, Time Life magazine, whatever it was called at the time.
Yeah, they paid $150,000 for it.
Yeah, and somewhere along the way, there's this thing of actual frames getting destroyed, frames missing from the Zap Rooter film. So something to look into. Do you think
that just happened because it passed through too many hands, or do you think that happened through some specific omission?
I don't know.
Your opinion? Don't know.
My opinion?
Yeah.
I haven't done enough of that type of work. The only thing that I can really like relate that to from my personal experience is like footage, right? That you have, and you like categorize your footage, and you make sure that that you keep everything and you back up and this and that. Like if you were a professional and someone entrusted you, especially something as important as this, like you wouldn't fuck it up. So it stinks a little bit to me if you're asking what
you would hope. Yeah.
Yeah. But that then again, I don't know that much about like film in particular. But yeah,
not only that, competence isn't always the standard in government.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
fair enough. To close this one out, though, I do want to discuss the Warren Commission a little bit. We won't get into their findings and that right now, but just to talk about some of the people who are on this thing. There are 7 members of the Warren Commission. That's not to say that only these 7 people touched it. It's actually a lot of like law clerks and things like that who do the real work on this thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I do think that it is important to look into who these people are, kind of wonder why they were selected for the committee, why it was organized this way by Johnson. I think that's important to note as well, that this is like a presidential order. What do you call it?
An executive order?
Executive order to create this Warren Commission to, look into the events and really find who's culpable, because obviously Oswald got killed.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's just go through those people. Earl Warren. Yeah,
that's the main one to mention. He was the 14th Chief Justice of the United States. Mm-hmm. So I think that probably it seems like a natural move to pick like a chief justice to be involved in a commission like this, right? I mean, like, not only does it involve the assassination of a president, it involves the commission of crime. Mm-hmm. And it might involve, either things that happened which may be gray in the law or which may not have been anticipated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's not the worst. He's not the worst pick. We'll get into
exactly. Yeah,
we'll talk about the worst pick next. But it is one thing that is a little bit weird about this, though, is he's got to be the Chief Justice of the United States and the chair of the Warren Commission at the same time.
I guess there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there.
Not a conflict of interest, just a conflict of, maybe a conflict of interest, that's true, but just a conflict of energy. Like, who the fuck can do both of those things?
That's a fair point, actually.
So he's obviously going to be distracted in one or the other, right? And that's one thing that I don't know. Like I said, he's not the worst one. The worst one is Alan Dulles. Like I have in my notes, Alan Dulles, why is he here? He was the former director of the CIA. He literally got fired by John F. Kennedy, right? So this is like if
worst person to have.
Dude, this is like if Tweety Bird went missing, so you appoint Sylvester the cat.
To find him. It's as if they had put like J. Edgar Hoover on the commission too, like.
Yeah, just anybody who hated Kennedy the most, you're gonna put him on there. Obviously, I mean that's just good commissioning, I
found it interesting that Gerald Ford was on this commission.
Yeah, he actually worked on the Oswald bio that section was mainly Gerald Ford's territory. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Gerald Ford, of course, goes on to become president and very famously pardons Richard Nixon. Yikes. Yeah.
What a legacy.
What a legacy indeed. Richard Russell Jr., he's another guy on this commission. Do you know anything about this guy?
He was the governor of Georgia for a couple of years, and then he moved on to a Senate seat, and he stayed there from, I think, straight from the 30s into the 70s, I believe. He was a mainstay of American politics for a very long time.
Yeah, one of his biggest thing, what he really loved talking about, segregation. All for it. Thought it was great. He was a co-author of the Southern Manifesto with Strom Thurmond. I don't know if you've ever heard the name Strom Thurmond before, but if you have, then you'll probably know that this Southern Manifesto wasn't about barbecue.
Who picked these? Well, LBJ picked these people.
Yeah,
Oh,
John Sherman. This guy kind of makes sense. I mean, in terms of like a guy to do this. He's a senator. He was most famous for opposing the Vietnam War. So that one I don't hate. Hale Boggs, member of the House, another segregationist, so not someone who would have been allied with Kennedy. And then we talked about Gerald Ford, but you also have this fella here, and this is a real conspiracy teaser one. So if you go and Google this guy, John J. McCloy, you'll find out that he has ties to the OSS, which was the predecessor to the CIA. Obviously, has ties to the CIA. So this guy is deeply embedded into like American secret agencies from the beginning. And also, he's the former president of the World Bank, Deven.
That I didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew he served as Secretary of War during World War II. That was the one that really poked out of his resume for me. It's just such an interesting group of people to choose to do this. And it kind of makes me wonder about LBJ's political affiliations, right? Like, I mean, I know he was a Democrat from the South, but he was huge on civil rights. Why would he have picked people like Richard Russell and Hale Boggs? Not that segregation has anything to do with this, but why them?
You do have to ask yourself, right? Like, why these people? There must be some logic to it, right? But the way that things unfold as well afterward, especially with like Gerald Ford and stuff like that, you're wondering about, maybe are people being rewarded for what or different things going on. It's the way that they set this up. Maybe they didn't want to, make it suspicious, but Allen Dulles is a pretty suspicious pick to put on this thing. And interestingly enough, like I mentioned, Earl Warren, he's pretty busy, right? He's not going to be there for everything. Allen Dulles attended the most meetings. He put in the most time, the most hours to this. He took it personally, how this thing was going to unfold and what were going to be the findings of this thing.
That's really interesting to note because that gives him a huge amount of control in forming that narrative, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously, the narrative at the end of it being, Lee Harvey Oswald shot him alone with no involved conspiracy. The end.
That's right. Yeah, the end, and let's not even consider anything else, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But we're gonna consider some other stuff in the next podcast. Before we get out of here, though, I do want to, if I can, Deven, just kind of we like to end these episodes with kind of what we learned by reading into this stuff, right? And we did a lot of praising Kennedy in the last episode, right? We also were quite critical of him, where he made mistakes and the things that he screwed up, right? And I think it's fair to look at both. You mentioned the thing of succession, right? And one of the things that you have to judge a leader on is succession, right? And let me just ask you this, like, the way that things went down here, does it show that Kennedy wasn't that skilled of a politician? Was he not that skilled of a president? The fact that he basically got ensnared into a trap any way that you want to look at it, right?
I think one bad choice doesn't negate the good things that he did, right?
Yeah.
Like he still navigated through the Cuban Missile Crisis, but unfortunately, that choice of succession and where it led to and how he got drawn into everything, it probably sent America down the lesser of two good roads, you know what I mean? Like, America's story as far as resolving itself isn't finished yet. It's still a nation with a huge amount of division, with a huge amount of strife and conflict. And I think that maybe a Kennedy-guided path might have been maybe a little bit better for developing that and growing America forwards as a society. Mm-hmm. But like you say, he was going to get caught up in that trap maybe either way. Doesn't mean he was a bad president, but it does mean he maybe made a bad decision.
Yeah.
But the other question is would he have been elected without LBJ on his ticket?
Yeah, I think one of like the thing that I'm kind of taking away from it is like just don't have heroes to that degree. Like don't get so obsessed with like somebody else like saving you, I guess. Don't try to have a savior. At least like one who, like, any person is going to have faults, right? Kennedy had a lot of faults, and like, to be honest, like, he's dead now, guys. So we can take inspiration from him and an example. But at the end of the day, like, it's up to us. Like, it's up to us to figure this stuff out, right?
And I think there's almost something a little bit sort of humanizing and inspiring about the fact that Kennedy wasn't perfect, right? Like, that you can objectively look at what his intentions were and what he did as a president and say, okay, he wanted to do good and he did good. But, like, that doesn't mean that he was a perfect person. But that also means that, like, any imperfect person has that potential to get into that position and do good. You know what I mean? Because we're never going to elect a perfect person. That doesn't exist. But there's some inspiring element to the fact that, like, that he had these very human fallacies, that he was a philanderer and that he loved to party and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I find it relatable anyways. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost more inspiring to learn like the full story of the person, right? Because every time that, I mean, I at this point in my life, I like to think that I'm, not jaded, but at least that I'm like savvy to that. And when a perfect story is presented, I'm always wondering, like, like with the Michael Jordan thing, like nobody could be the person who was sold to us as this guy Michael Jordan, right? Like, so now when I see something, I'm always wondering, like, what's the real story? And there's the real story with Kennedy is he obviously wasn't a perfect person, and he obviously made some mistakes. I don't think that you can really blame him for getting killed, I guess, right? That's not really his fault.
It isn't his fault at all, no.
But maybe you can blame him for leaving Johnson in charge, right? Because that was his choice.
That I do blame him for.
So, yeah.
And I mean, like, there's a lot of people who would disagree with me about Johnson. Obviously, nobody's universally good or bad, and he did good things. But obviously, having gotten into it and probably going to get into it next episode, I'll just say that a lot of those good things were probably heavily balanced out by some really bad things that he did.
For sure. Maybe some really, really bad things.
Yeah, potentially.
I mean, he did really bad things because the Vietnam War was really bad, but you know what I mean.
We'll get into, there's more bad things.
There's more bad
stuff. But that raises a question. Could a person be the president of the United States for a 4-year period without doing a bad thing?
No.
Is it possible?
No, probably not. I don't know. Maybe Jimmy Carter got the closest, but...
And look how that went.
Yeah. Anyways, this has been a rad episode, Deven. Thank you for jumping on here early in the morning. Thank you for doing all the research, man, because that's the biggest part of this, honestly. Like, it's an hour of recording the podcast, but the research is the big thing, and I just really appreciate your dedication.
I like reading the autopsy reports and stuff anyways. I would do that stuff in my spare time, so it's like...
Yeah, it is cool. It is very cool. And to find those sources that you like, and it is like a treasure hunt in a way that I do truly enjoy. Yeah. Before we get out of here, I do have to tell you guys, if you want to check out more stuff from Deven's working on some podcast stuff. So just keep listening.
Soon.
Keep listening. Yep. And we'll be telling you stuff about that. As for following this podcast, Deven, where can people find this podcast?
Well, obviously they can find it on Instagram.
They can.
They can find it on Spotify.
They can.
They can find it on Apple Podcast.
Indeed.
And there was, I think, a new one that you mentioned that I wasn't aware of last week. I believe.
There's Overcast.
Overcast. There
you can find it on there. I never even heard of it until I looked at analytics, and it's there. YouTube. You can check out our Patreon. You can give us money if you want to. There's no bonus episodes or anything like that left yet, I should say. But maybe if we
just out of the goodness of your hearts.
Yeah. If you want to throw us a Canadian dollar or an American dollar, that's cool. And there's
we call that a loonie.
A loonie or even a toonie. And you can also go on YouTube. You can find the podcast on YouTube. For our something random, normally I do a legit something random, but today I want to plan out the something random, which kind of goes against the whole ethos of the something random.
Well, what is it? I'm on the edge of my seat.
Okay, so I'm gonna end this one on a joke for you guys. So there's this history professor, right? He's doctor of history, Dr. Cummings, let's call him. No, that's not. Let's call him Dr. Dr. Ford.
There we go. Okay.
Dr. Ford, he's a professor of history. So he's teaching, and he goes home, and he's got his young son. His son says, "Dad, I heard that you were a doctor, right, in your work. And does that mean that you heal people, right?" So Dr. Ford says, No, I'm a doctor of history. So that means, that I have a doctorate, but I'm dealing with history. So the son thinks about it for a second, and he looks back at his dad and he says, "Oh, so that means that you cure people in the past?" We'll see you next week.